back. Welcome to another episode of Integration Insider, where we bring you insights from the world of systems integration. So we are on our third episode in a MuleSoft Migration Demystified series. In this episode, we are demystifying the Azure pricing. So this is all about costing, comparing apples to apples, MuleSoft to Azure integration pricing.
I like it.
All right, start with the intros. Tim Bieber, I'm Growth and Strategy Director, and Derek Marley is our Principal Integration Strategist at Horton Cloud. We are a Microsoft business partner. We've got a lot of pedigree in the MuleSoft space, so we're really excited to just be digging in and helping with this demystification of MuleSoft and Azure integration. So our previous episode, maybe I'll toss this over to you. You can fill us in on our previous episode with Kent Weir and then what we're going to be talking about in this episode, because that's exciting. But I've been doing too much talking.
Yeah, that's fair. The last episode we saw Kent really helping us better understand Azure Logic App flows. Maybe a couple episodes ago, we kind of did a comparison to know what a MuleSoft flow and then what does that look like in the Logic App. So we've kind of been building up, and obviously the next question is great. Technologies look sound, a little bit of a technical bake-off going on there. What's next? Pricing. Yeah. Pricing's the question. So
demystifying the platforms, workflow to flow, demystifying the pricing now. How do prices compare? Obviously, that's what everyone's been asking us.
Yeah. So I think let's dig in. Let's just kind of look at what MuleSoft. I mean, obviously, integration is wide, right?
Yeah.
All kinds of scenarios, volume, complexity that drives a lot of integration considerations. So let's just kind of roll back to maybe its simplest form. If you've taken on MuleSoft. Traditionally, the conversation starts at what they call the notion of a 2x4. So that's 2 vCores in production, and then they allot you 4 vCores for lower environment deployments. So let's kind of dig in. We have
That's
a slide.
The starting point, yes.
Let's share the slide.
There's the share screen. You take over, Derek.
Right. Okay, so what we've done here is I'm going to describe, I guess, what the notion of a 2x4 is in the MuleSoft ecosystem. So really what that means is they take the production environment and they say there's 2 cores, it's about 10 gigs worth of RAM. And when you deploy, you kind of select what portion of that vCore you want to use for each, they call it app. So it's an integration that gets deployed. So then the 2x4, so the notion of 4 is 2 vCores for an environment like your QA environment, and then development. And some organizations will have more environments, so you'll have to have a conversation around just more cores for each environment, but they split them that way.
And I have to have an understanding of how many cores are going to be useful for me over a longer term, correct? I need to have pre-allocated this over many years.
Yeah, so what we'll see organizations do, that's a great question, is more, they have to trend that, right? So you got to say, okay, I have an initiative here. I'm trying to integrate these 2 systems. I've got maybe 3-4 integrations to build immediately, but you want to trend that over a 5-year term, right? So you're going to say, this is where my vCore usage is going to trend to over time. And you got to start thinking about it in that context. And that's no different than any platform. So it's just when you think of them as you buy a core at a time. After you've bought the 2x4, you'll usually start to buy more cores for each environment. So just keep it. So that's how they split them. For this one, we've kind of said it's, traditionally you'll have 10 managed APIs. And again, if you're going to have more than that, it's a discussion that you're going to have with your sales rep. Secrets manager, so that's like storing passwords and connection parameter information for databases and cloud systems. And then the other one's VPC, virtual private cloud. So that's like connecting to your data centers, your on-prem systems, and your so connectivity, if you will. And that's kind of what we say right now for our comparison is what we are going to kind of compare now on the Azure side.
And just that we know that this is the starter. Like you're not getting any smaller than this.
No, this is what they sell. Yeah,
this is the starting point.
Definitely north of this, but this is kind of where you begin.
Yeah. So it's just an opportunity for us as a starting point, even in our apples to apples comparison.
Yeah, and then we'll see some organizations come in and they pay the full amount, so that's $250,000 per year that you're going to pay. But we have seen discounts based off of the negotiation. So in this scenario, we've just said off the top, let's just cut 30% off. to give us 175,000.
Keep losing our share there.
Yeah. So then I wanted to bring up this first one. So this one has, I'm going to follow the same thing in Azure. It's 2x4. So that's 2 vCores. It's a smaller. So, when you utilize your MuleSoft, if you're on the lower end of using your 2 full vCores, then this probably matches you well so that you're not paying for overcompute. So in the MuleSoft world, you'll have to account for always keeping a bit of contingency. So like paying for compute you'll never use, because you'll have a scenario where you run out of memory on pricing file comes in, it's bigger than usual, and that's not enough. You've allocated a 0.1 vCore or a 0.2 vCore, and that's not enough to handle the integration. Right. So you got to keep some to always being able to react to that. So if you're on the smaller, you're not using all of it, then we think this scenario fits well for you. Again, they match QA environment, development environment. Maybe the only other call out here is in the Azure ecosystem, you can go down. Yes. Right? You don't have to keep them all matching for cross. So we'll see organizations have a pre-prod environment and a development environment, and maybe even lower than a development environment where they don't have to add all of the compute, and it doesn't fully have to match. Yep. So that's another consideration. In this one, we're just using the basic API, but it's unlimited managed APIs, if you will. You use more of an enterprise Azure Key Vault, so that can be used across your enterprise for things other than integration. So it's a nice win there. But a product on its own, it's being managed by a product team on its own, very robust. And then we have our VNet and VPN from there.
But already I'm spotting a very large pricing discrepancy.
Yeah, so we're going to share the pricing calculator, how we get to these numbers, and we'll give you the links for those. But we calculated at $33,000 annually.
So call that if we're on an apples to apples, call that a little bit on the lower side. But we have seen a lot of organizations that have the 2x4 from MuleSoft and are not using even remotely close to its capacity. So this would account for that a little bit on the smaller side.
So then we wanted to give the other side of that. So let's look at, maybe we call it a 4x8 in our scenario. So we have 4 vCores, so it's double, and double the memory. So we have 14 gigs of RAM across 3 environments, prod, 2 lowers. We kept the same comparables. In this case, we have unlimited managed APIs. We still have our Key Vault, and then we have our VPN VNet. Without discounts, we're looking at $52,000 per year. So substantially. So we're looking at that 80% savings probably on the 2x4 and maybe 70% on the 4x8. Right. Over the already discounted 30% off. So if we want to use this as our scenario, we're going to say we'll just take the average of the two maybe as a price comparison. And we have 42,500. Yeah. So if we are looking at this, because obviously it's a little bit difficult, and that's the reason for this video. Is really just to, given our knowledge of MuleSoft, given our knowledge of the 2x4, we believe this is the closest comparison. So really, I mean, what we're trying to show is there's a substantial price savings, obviously, but if you were to compare the compute and memory, the 2x4 on MuleSoft is either kind of in the middle of a 2x4 or what we're terming a 4x8. So $43,000 versus $175,000. And like I said earlier, it's all integration is so different. Again, it's so many variables that you have to take into account. But what we did do with these scenarios is we have a link, and we'll share it in the video. Yeah, I'll put it in the description. So you can use that handy kind of as your starting point. Maybe we can even go through a little bit now and kind of pick apart. Yeah, let's actually jump over there, because I think what's important here is to see that Microsoft has that transparent pricing, so you can easily configure and build your system. So if you said, well, 2x4 is very minimal, I'm not using 2x4, I'm interested in this migration path, but I really want to have an understanding of what I'm paying on my end. On the Azure side, we can show you the calculator. You can use the link. That's a starting point for you. So let's jump over there quickly. Maybe, Tim, while you're looking for that, one thing I don't think we hit home on when looking at this pricing calculator, we kind of calculated it for a whole year. But we know that's not the way projects are executed. Projects are executed from inception, like, hey, I got this concept, the business has this idea, I need to start working on it. And so pay as you kind of only for what you use in the Microsoft ecosystem, I can just start adding componentry, more compute at that point. And we know that for months, as you're doing that development, before it even gets to QA, you're not overpaying for it. And that's one thing I really like about this model is with the MuleSoft ecosystem, like you're pre-bought at the beginning of the year and you're constantly trying to find that ROI point. And you're trying to rush your integrations into a higher environment so you can utilize it and find that ROI. In this pay for what you use model in the Azure space, it's going to be south of the numbers we're showing because eventually you're just working towards that, filling up that compute space.
Yeah, so it would be very noticeable in the first year, let's say. So you've spent $175,000 in the first year.
Yeah.
And in your first year of migrating over to Azure, you're not spending $43,000 yet.
No.
But just like all things considered equal, apples to apples comparison. Once you were live on all the comparable integrations, it's $175,000 versus $43,000 on the Azure side. So I mean, a very, very compelling reason, obviously, to consider Azure. Yeah. Okay. Let me get that screen share up. We're sharing. So you can just Google Azure Pricing Calculator. You'll be brought to this page.
But our link will fill all this data.
Exactly. So this is a starting point template that has this pricing that I'll show you. But if you want to go in and manipulate this, you can. Once you go in, you can see the integration tab and section opens up here. We've pre-populated this with what we described as the comparable 4x8 solution, the larger, the $52,000 annual cost. So we've pre-calculated all of this in here for the larger scale version. You can see, for instance, like starting from the top, API management under $100 a month. The bulk of it being given that you're going to be migrating over your flows. So you've got the workflows of Logic Apps here.
And maybe the one there is like the API management, you can just pick a different tier. So if there's some features that you really want, this is the one you would adjust there. The flows are pretty accurate in migration because we can look at, you've allocated a 0.1 and a 0.2.
Sure.
But we are comparable at that point. So this one, point. So the ones that you're going to play with are probably your API management.
And you can go in, you can go in here and you can change any of the values here. But this again, is the starting point. But what we've built here and what we've termed a 4x8, which 4x8 that terminology doesn't exist.
No.
In the Azure side, but in the spirit of apples to apples comparison, this is the larger scale 52,000, and you can see down here. This is monthly, so times that by 12, you're at the 52,000. But if we're kind of looking at that range of the 33,000, a little bit of a lower end, MuleSoft equivalent 2x4, or the higher end, that's that 43. That's
it's like double the vCores, 50% more RAM. Yeah. Right? So then the MuleSoft comparable.
Yeah. And typically when we are migrating somebody over that is using the minimal 2x4, it typically does fall into that lighter weight $33,000 commitment. And they're probably not hitting that $33,000 commitment until well into that first year. So there's just considerable cost savings that are there.
It's good to just do the comparable.
Yeah.
Right. Let's compare the two.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that's here linked below in the description for you to go and play with. But it's nice to see that Microsoft has this transparent pricing that you can go in and you can price this out. But it does help to have some consultants like us that have the under the hood experience with MuleSoft, that know what the 2x4, what is included in the 2x4, what the 2x4 limitation is, what it can and can't do, and what that's going to price out, and what the equivalent on the Azure side is going to be. So stop sharing that. Is there anything else that we want to talk about with that? We haven't really got to.
I think for me, I think the pricing calculator will get you where you need to go. And if you need help, that's where we kind of step in. And having both sides of that, we have the knowledge on the MuleSoft side. We can definitely help you. And we have a way to do that. Yeah,
that's true. So we have a fast start assessment package. That assessment package is basically us putting an architect and a strategist on the account. We look at that over a project. Sometimes those are 2 weeks, sometimes those are 3 or 4 weeks. It's not really a time stamp to it per se, but
outcome based. Yeah.
But that's a package that we have that really allows us to audit your MuleSoft system to get us get us understanding how many cores you're using, how many integrations you have, because what we've shown with the pricing calculator is really only half the battle in understanding what your ongoing, I mean, the most important half, understanding the ongoing costs of what this is going to cost if I move over to Azure integration services. But what you also want to know is what's the upfront, what's the migration going to cost me? And that's where we specialize ourselves, obviously.
We can add a link to that as well.
Yeah.
Our offer.
And you want to know what that's going to cost you. So yeah. All right. Well, I think
this was a good one. I like this one.
Yeah, I think we covered it all. That was pretty quick.
Because it's not easy to compare them.
No, it isn't.
But if we take just the bare 2x4 concept, I think it did well to kind of at least give you a ballpark of conceptually how you would go about sizing this.
Yeah, and in the spirit of demystifying, like it's an intimidating thing, and we want to take that fear of the unknown out when you're considering moving off of MuleSoft and showing that the right path for you is the Azure path. It's the most cost effective. You're using a lot of Azure services already. Take the cost savings, take the simplicity, take the added services that Azure has to offer, make the plunge.
So we've done a video on kind of conceptually how you would kind of approach a migration. So how would you move a 3-layered architecture from MuleSoft over to something like Azure? So we've done a good job to do that. We've kind of compared them component, like I said, like a lightweight technical bake-off, a flow on this side is a workflow on this side, and kind of breaking those apart. Then we have Kent. Kent joined us and really showed us a little bit more detail inside logic apps. Yeah. And now pricing. So I think we've hit the big four.
And more to come in further demystifying this. But for now, let's go back to work.
Okay.
All right. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.